Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. I make videos to enable and encourage others to teach themselves foreign languages, ideally not just to the point where they're able to speak them, but even beyond that to really high levels where they're able to enjoy reading the literature and otherwise exploring the culture of the languages that they are learning. Recently, I made a couple of videos giving step-by-step demonstrations of specific methods and techniques. I've seen that these are popular and that people would like me to do other such videos. I'm contemplating which ones I can do. But before I do any like that, I want to do this sort of theoretical background talk, kind of philosophy of language learning, about some points that if you're not aware of them, if you don't take corrective action or preventive action about these things, these can really undermine your progress, your ability to use any technique or any method. So I'm going to talk about these 5 things today. I call them 5 mistakes or errors or 5 omissions, 5 things that people don't take into consideration enough when they are embarking upon the task of teaching themselves a foreign language. And these 5 things are: 1, an overall conceptual framework for the procedure. 2 is the real need to have it be a practice, to have a set time and place for doing it. And then the other 3 relate to ways of being focused and not distracted when you are engaged in studies. And these relate to digital detox and the spiritual side of learning and the physical side of learning. So I will put timestamps in the description so you can go straight away to any one of these points. I am a university professor by profession. I might be too long-winded at times. If I'm going on about one thing and you want to skip ahead to the next, you can do that. So the first thing that needs to be taken seriously into consideration when you embark upon the task of teaching yourself a foreign language is this conceptual framework of what you're doing. And I feel that probably one of the most common mistakes or omissions that people have when they embark upon this task is not to do this. They don't have a framework. They have no framework at all, or even worse, they have a false framework, an erroneous framework. So basically, that false framework most often takes the form of people imagining that learning a foreign language is something that you can really sort of box off and define and say, here, I do not know a language, so I do this, and now, bam, I know the language, I'm done. And that's just not the way that it works. There are times when you might just be studying for a test or to go on specific vacation and want some basic conversational abilities, but in the main, when people embark upon teaching themselves a foreign language, they're doing it because they want to know it really well. Most people say, I want to become fluent in this. They want this to become a part of them. They want to know it and have it be something that they have always as a permanent addition to themselves. And so that is a lifelong task. Inherently, by nature, is a lifelong task. Yes, you can do, I described in my Teach Yourself 15 minutes a day, every day. For a year, you can master a certain set of manuals within that time and therefore go from having 0 knowledge to being an advanced beginner and knowing infinitely more than you did when you had 0 knowledge. But still, the path from that stage to the next stage, intermediate, more advanced, true fluency, real cultural abilities, a polished knowledge, this is an infinite scale. It's really a lifelong task. So when you embark upon learning a language, it's like, if you're unaware of that, it's like thinking you're going for a walk around the block, when in effect you're actually going to hike around the world for the rest of your life. So you're not prepared, you can't pack, you don't know what's coming up. And what's coming up is the fact that learning a language is not a smooth path. It has hills and valleys, it has plateaus, it has steep parts, it has slope downhill parts, it has long parts when you feel like you're stagnant. And all of that is really par for the course. And if you don't know that, when you set out and you're not prepared for it, when you hit these things, you're likely to get frustrated. You're likely to get discouraged and want to give up. You're likely to feel like, I don't understand. I was doing this and it was working well, and now I'm not getting the results anymore. I must be doing something wrong. I better stop, which is obviously fatal to your endeavor if you want to learn the language. And in point of fact, it's natural and to be expected that as you go along, you are going to need to use different techniques. What works at one stage will not always work. You'll need to do something else. And more than anything else, you're going to need to put more and more time into learning a language. You can start out by just doing a little bit, but the more advanced you get, the more time you need to get. So that's something you really need to know. The other thing that you need to know, the other, I think, false conception that people have, is that teaching yourself a foreign language as an adult has very little in common, almost nothing in common with naturally acquiring a language as a child growing up in an environment, or even being taught a language as part of your schooling, as part of your education. So other people are in charge and they tell you you're going to do it and it's part of your coursework. The decision to teach yourself a language as an adult is really fundamentally different. And so to think that it's going to be similar is to set yourself up for, again, the same kind of deceptions and disappointments that are likely to make you feel like maybe you should stop, when in point of fact, this is natural and par for the course. So teaching yourself a foreign language as an adult is inherently, on the one hand, it's repetitive. It's reinventing the wheel. You know a language already, and now you're telling yourself you're trying to redo it. But on the other hand, it is a choice. It is something that you're endeavoring to do to expand your mind, to expand your capabilities. It's a question of real human development. It's a question of giving yourself not just a skill to speak a language, but an overall mind-expanding ability to be able to communicate and understand in a different form from the one that you happened to be reared in. And so this is inherently, as I said, it's a broad-based humanistic task of self-development. So as a holistic task, it's going to have not just it's sitting and studying and memorizing vocabulary or things. This is an intellectual side, so it's a mental exercise. But as a holistic task, you can do it much better if it is also a spiritual exercise and a physical exercise. You incorporate all of these aspects into the endeavor to expand yourself, you will have a much better chance of succeeding it. So again, this lack of conceptual framework, not understanding that it's a lifelong task, thinking it's a limited task, and not understanding that there are hills and valleys, and not understanding that it's a task of human development. I just told you these basic, I think I can call them facts or aspects of it, good advice. But as human beings, we often hear good advice and not necessarily have it go in one ear and not the other, but it's hard to act on it. But it's important that you act on this advice, that you realize that you're engaged in a lifelong task that has hills and valleys, and that is an overall one of holistic human development rather than just communication skills. So in order to get that into you, here's an assignment for you. If you want to take that seriously, I want you, it'll seem kind of strange, but it's a very useful exercise, to go take those specific points that I just mentioned and have a conversation with yourself in front of a mirror. Look yourself in the face and say to yourself, do I really understand that this is not a limited task, that it's a lifelong task? Do I really understand that there are natural hills and valleys, and I'm going to have to put in more time, and I'm going to have to do different things, and I don't need to get discouraged when I find that I do? Do I really understand that this is not just learning how to communicate in a different way, but this is a way of actuating myself, of developing myself? This is a holistic task of human development. Do I really understand these things? Look yourself in the face in the mirror and ask yourself these questions. And when you can say yes, then you're in a better position to continue with the learning than if you don't consider it or if you say no. So, since it's a task, a holistic, humanistic development task, it should be done as a practice. And a practice means a regular routine. A practice means that you do something in a set time and place. And that is absolutely necessary, particularly when you are first getting into the habit of teaching yourself a language, and then it's so necessary that once you're in the habit, you're bound to continue doing it. Yes, there's some virtue to being able to study on the go and being able to do other things, but in order to get into the habit of doing something on a regular and systematic basis, you need to have a place and a time to do it. And if you're going to succeed at a task like teaching yourself a foreign language, this is something you need to do each and every single day. After you're really established in the practice, yes, you can take a day or two off now and then if you're prevented from for other things. But when you're getting into the practice, if you miss a day or two, it can really derail the entire project. And nothing helps continue a project better than to have a set time and place to do your practice. So I think that the time aspect is something that I told you in my New Year's Day video about James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. If you don't know that, or other habit formation books, refer you to that for this kind of way to get into establishing a time habit. If you're going to try to study for 15 minutes at a time, it doesn't need to be all at once. You can ease your way into it, and you can get into habits by various techniques. You can tack a new habit, like studying a language, onto an old habit. Oh, when I drink my coffee, I will study my language. You can, every day you do it at the same time. You can do it after something. When I do one thing, I will then do another. After I've read the newspaper, I will also read a chapter in my language book. Or you can do it by substituting. Instead of sitting down and watching TV, I will sit down and study a language. So you can find a temporal aspect by following some of these habits, habit formation ideas. And in terms of the physical space, yes, ultimately it's nice if you can have a study, a library like mine. I've got books here for reading and for studying. I've got artwork, I've got music. It's a space that's dedicated and devoted to that. And this is a nice thing to have. I think I've worked up to this, earned this over the course of my life. I didn't always have it though. And I'll give you an anecdote for how I got started in the concept of having a space where I can do things. And that is back when I was in graduate school at the University of Chicago, when I was writing my dissertation, that I really needed to focus on. Eventually it was up to 500 pages long, and I tried to sit at my desk in my room and write sometimes, and sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't. I tried to go to the library and work there, and I just felt that I needed a place that was totally free of distractions. And so what I ultimately ended up doing, it's the most humble and humiliating kind of thing that I can imagine, but I'll share it with you to show what way you can find a place to be focused. And what I ended up doing was going to the closet, the wardrobe in my dormitory room, and taking the coats and everything out so there was space in the corner, putting a wooden chair in the corner, going in there and closing the door. So I was in a wardrobe, a closet. It was completely dark. I had, instead of my cat on my lap, I had my laptop computer there, so I was able to write and I was able to focus and get it done. So it's important that you get a space, you get a place like that where you can develop the practice, work on the practice. If you don't have that, it's very, very hard to get established in it and maintain your practice. So please give that some consideration, find and make the space and the time. The next three things that I want to talk about relate to, again, if you have a space and time where you can show up every day at the same time to do the same thing, this will work towards getting you to be focused when you get there. But it is also possible that you will show up there physically to work, but your mind won't be there. You'll be lacking focus. You'll be distracted. You'll be thinking about other things. We live constantly distracted, I think, in our day and age. And so it is very important that we do three things to try to cut down on these distractions. And the first one of these is it's critical that this specific place that you have that is dedicated for your serious language study, this needs to be a digital detox zone. I'm not a Luddite. I am filming this on my cell phone, I will upload it to YouTube. I am expanding a virtual academy where I interact with my students or participants through Zoom. I spend hours each day on the computer. I get tons of information and valuable things from it. However, I am aware that it's necessary from time to time to get away from it, to unplug, to have it not be there. I am aware that when you are sitting next to a computer, it's very easy just to think, oh, I want to check something. Let me look at one thing. And then hours later, you will be looking at something else. Language study, effective, efficient language study needs to be totally focused, totally concentrated. And therefore, I think it is important, it's critical that when you engage in concentrated language study, that you have your cell phone and your computer, you leave them in the next room. I've seen studies that show if you have it in your bag or out of sight, you're still thinking about it. It's better to have it be not just out of sight, really in another place, another room, so that you are not tempted to think, oh, just let me check something. You're not distracted by these devices that are inherently multitasking. And therefore, I also have to say that I am aware that there are these days there are very good pedagogically sound language learning apps for your cell phone and computer programs. And these might be things that you want to explore as supplementary materials to your language learning voyage, lifelong task. But that your actual study, you should not use these things. You should use book and pen and paper, get away from the constant pull of needing to be on a device that is inherently designed to make you be distracted, make you multitask. You need to be 100% focused on the task of learning a language when you're learning a language. So digital detox is one way to bring focus into the language learning arena. And now moving on to the fourth topic, the fourth thing that I think people don't consider enough, and that is the value of activating the spiritual side of language learning in that holistic endeavor, and really bringing this in to play more than anything else. If you are not studying first thing in the morning, if you are coming to sit down and study a language after being busy and involved and engaged, it's really necessary to clear your mind. Even first thing in the morning, it's a good thing. So there are three basic ways that you can sort of bring this spiritual side into your language studies, and all of them are ways that you can get into the habit that I mentioned before, because these are things that I think are easier to do, shorter, easier to do than studying a language. And you can just say, after I do these things, then I will study my language, and I will be focused when I do it. So the three ways that you can bring spirituality into language learning are, one is if you are a believer, if you're a Christian, or maybe a Muslim or a Jew or some other, you believe in God that you can pray to. Well, pray. Pray before you study. Ask for intentionality. Ask not to be distracted. Ask to be focused. Ask to be strong so that you can develop yourself and give yourself what you need in order to be focused. Maybe you're more of a Buddhist type or a meditating type, whatever stripe, and instead of prayer, meditation can do it. So meditate. Meditate. Practice some sort of mindfulness, some sort of meditation immediately before you study, and then go from being relaxed and concentrated and focused to sitting in a place where you can use that concentration or focus. Maybe you don't have any patience for any religion, for prayer or for meditation, but you still need to breathe. And the word for breathe, animism, animus, has relating to spirit as well. So do some breathing exercises. You can either divorce some of the pranayama exercises from yoga and just do those, or you can go into some of the sort of power breathing exercises of somebody like Wim Hof, or DMT breathing, or what the Navy SEALs do, box breathing, any number of just basic breathing exercises will help you calm down, be more relaxed, and be sort of a warm-up to doing your language studies. I think warm-up is a perfect analogy. I have often talked about language learning, language study being a form of mental exercises, quite similar to physical exercise. And just the way you would not go for a run or start lifting weights without doing some sort of warm-up to get your muscles ready to do it, I think that you ought not to try to sit down and concentrate and do some mental exercise, such as real learning, language learning, without doing some sort of warm-up, spiritual warm-up, prayer, meditation, deep breathing exercises. So that's the fourth thing. And then the fifth thing, so you've brought the spiritual side into language learning. And then the fifth thing is to not forget, if this is a holistic endeavor, it's very important to bring in a physical side to language learning. So I really enjoy sitting in a nice comfortable armchair with a cat on my lap reading a book. I can do that for long periods of time. There are times when it's necessary to sit at a desk. If you're writing and doing scriptorium and you're looking at other things, if you're doing some of the techniques that I showed where you've got two texts in front of you and you're reading with your fingers, there are times when you need it to be sit still at your desk. But I think that the idea that sitting still at a desk for long periods of time, coming from studying in a library or in school, is erroneous and not conducive to good language study. If you are going to be studying languages, I think it's important to incorporate movement as much as you can. For instance, I have made several videos about shadowing, listening and repeating, which I feel is best done while you're walking rapidly, ideally outside. So that is one way of incorporating movement into your language studies. I also have, I feel like when you are not using both fingers or writing in a book, if you're just reading a book, reading it aloud, you should read aloud when you do language studies. It's possible to, even in your study, to sort of move around, and instead of just sitting still, to sort of move and do some calisthenics type things. I might call this polysthenics. Poly from doing many things, polyitis, and sthenics, moving around. This is something I tend to do, and hell, if people are really interested, maybe I'll make a video to show some of that. But it's not a specific thing, it's just the concept that you basically don't want to be static. If you sit static, your mind will get static. And I think this is really important when you want to study or you need to study for longer periods of time. I've talked about particularly for language study, 15 minutes being sort of an ideal time to stay focused. And if you are a polyglot type and you've got multiple languages that you're studying, you might find, I did in the past, that just switching between one task, one language and another was enough to keep you fresh. But if you're going to be studying the same language, if you're going to be studying the same thing and you want to have a longer period, then I think that it really is necessary that you do some of the things that I mentioned in the past video, where I used my cat for purring for 15 minutes to give you a timer and then set at the end. Sorry, I don't want to disturb him, but after you've been sitting for a long time, it's important that you stand up. It's important that you give yourself a good stretch and twist. Okay? It's important you do some deep breathing. It's important you do something relatively strenuous, like some push-ups. Then you get a sip of water. And then you can sit back down and you can continue studying. The point is not to get yourself winded or break a sweat by any means, but slightly winded, just to get your blood pumping, to get yourself so that you're not becoming static by sitting still, but to get really refreshed. I truly find that studying in this fashion, 15 minutes studying, just take a 1-minute break and do these things, enables me to go on for many hours for studying. In the last video, some of the comments mentioned how is this way sort of similar to or different from the Pomodoro method. And the Pomodoro method, if you don't know it, is you study for 25 minutes and you take a 5-minute break, and you do this 3 times. After 4th time, you take a longer break. And in those 5 minutes, it's not prescribed that you do any sort of stretching or physical exercise or anything. So I don't know, that might be really good for studying history or some other thing where you're writing an essay, but from my perspective, that's too long. 25 minutes is too long to try to focus on language study. 15 minutes is good enough, and 5 minutes is too long a break. 5 unstructured minutes to do something else really gets your mind wandering. So 1 minute of good breathing and moving and stretching and something slightly strenuous to get your blood moving gets you able to be focused and clear when you sit down again. So that's the physical side of language learning. So the 5 things that I talked about today are the necessity of having a good, clear, conceptual framework of what you're doing when you're teaching yourself a foreign language. You're embarking on a lifelong task that is it's going to have highs and lows. These are to be expected. You're going to need to do other things and give more time to it. It has very little in common with learning a native language. It's a holistic task of conscious, deliberate human growth that needs to bring in other sides as well. It needs to be done in a set place and time. That set place and time should be away from digital devices, and it should be warmed up with some sort of spiritual exercise, and it should be kept fresh about every 15 minutes or so with some break that involves breath and breathing and stretching and slight calisthenics if you're not able to do something like moving while shadowing or polysthenics. I hope this was helpful and useful to you, and I will talk to you again next time. Thank you.